about 15 years ago, it occurred to me that women have a different opinion about power than men do. We can talk about power in terms of the theories that the academics put forth, but it's not how we live. The women I know have a different definition of power. And so that's when I started to ask people to tell me true stories about a time when you were powerful. And what I learned is that the stories don't match what the theories tell us power is. And I trust our hearts and our personal experiences more than I trust what the theories that Machiavelli came up with about what power is and how it should be used. And so I wanted to share that with you tonight because I trust that you all have an insight into what power really is that's more valuable and has a lot more wisdom than the things we read in a bunch of leadership books. Okay, who's going first?
When I was in my 20s, I started working out with weights and bodybuilding. I decided that I'm never going to look like one of these bombshell women. So let's see what are my positive traits, and let's work on those characteristics. So I began working out with weights, and it got to the point where I was just bored with it. I needed a goal. I was working around a lot of bodybuilders. So they said, well, why don't you try bodybuilding? So I said, okay. So I was still doing the same kinds of things, but I was getting more training. I was getting training more. I mean, I was just getting stronger, and I went on my first diet that I stayed on. I had a trainer that helped me. And that kind of made me feel proud that I was able to stay on this diet. Believe me, it was horrible. But anyway, it was like no food as you get closer. So I set up to do a competition. That was the thing. The first competition didn't go well, so we're just going to bypass that one. But I went on this diet. I trained. I practiced poses. I got a little, posing number down with music. You have to have all of that. And I went to this competition. I got up there. There were only 4 in my novice category, so that was good. It's a small competition. And I got up there and I did my routine. I felt really good about it. I said, this went well. I got second place. Now, I was very thrilled about that. I thought, I should have. I'm glad. I see from the other women, I should have gotten. I really should have gotten first place. But that made me feel quite powerful in the sense that I had taken my body and I had some control over it, and I had made it into what I wanted. You might say I body sculpted. Now, just an addendum to that. The woman who got first place, I was actually 33. She was 18. She was bulked up. Where every muscle showed on me, she was just big. And I realized what the message they were sending was, yes, you have to use steroids. So that was my only competition. And it was all I needed was one competition to make me realize what I could do.
In my career as a college administrator, I had some pretty fancy titles, supervised large numbers of people, and I thought I understood power, authority, influence, how to get things done. But I really discovered the true meaning of power a few years ago. I was teaching a class for adult students at Guilford College as a part-time instructor. Great pleasure for me teaching just a little bit. And the fact that these were students over 25 who were stretching themselves to try to develop new careers or perhaps for the first time enter the workforce, I really enjoyed that. One night, when the class was finished, the semester was over, I'd handed back the papers, The students were leaving. They came to say goodbye. One older woman stopped by to talk to me when everyone else had left. I guess she was maybe in her mid-40s. She had participated in the class from time to time. She'd written some nice papers. I had respect for her. But she came to tell me that when she started the class, she'd been prepared to drop out of college. She thought she did not have the ability. She wasn't interested in the topic. She couldn't see herself starting a career this late in life. She had just given up on herself, and that class had changed her. She said, I've discovered that I've got skills that I had previously not recognized, and you helped to highlight them. I found things of interest in the material that previously I just skimmed over, and the more I looked into it, the more I enjoyed it. And I discovered that I can be a good student. So I'm not only going to finish my degree, I'm going to go have a career. And you helped me do that. That was the moment in which I knew a different and I think most important kind of power. And that's the ability that an individual can have to encourage other people, to help them find the strength to make the most of their lives. That was the most powerful moment of my life.
Last October, I went to my first ever retreat. It was for a week. I have never been to a retreat. I somehow had convinced myself that I wasn't somebody that got to do those things. And it was for a week. And the way that I ended up there was this very inexplicable series of events of me receiving a book that I didn't know where it came from, and eventually reading it, and a quote sticking out to me, and me researching the woman that said the quote, and this beautiful series of events that in my life, I generally choose to brush away because my life is so amazing and I just don't, my intellect fights it tooth and nail. And I was trying to do that with this. And the particular retreat that was in October was an invitation retreat. And I had never met the woman that had given the quote. Anyway, I got invited and I tried to talk myself out of going. And I went. And that week, it also happened that the woman lived in Austin, Texas, and everyone else coming lived at different corners of the country. And it was at Well of Mercy, which is an hour from Greensboro. So other people flew and I drove. It just was really funny. And I had really worked at not having preconceived notions of what that week was going to be like. And by the second day, they had all flown out the window. I was met by a group of people that had such rich spiritual centers and such a desire to tap into their own creativity and to encourage each other with an umbrella of social justice, but also holding silence and space and a complete lack of judgment in a way that I've maybe never experienced. There was writing and sharing and music and discussion and quiet and walks. And I was able unintentionally to be so much my authentic self without anyone shining back a reflection that was anything but brave and honest and loving. And I was able to also do that for them. The only two things that we weren't allowed to discuss were what we did for a living and what our spiritual practice was, which is just the most glorious things to be taken away. I have a temper, and I can feel powerful when I'm not able to keep it in check. And I know that underlying that is just a whole lot of fear that I work on. But the power that comes with peace and acceptance and honesty and love is so powerful, from the root of yourself, from the ground all the way up through the soles of your feet through the top of your head, so that you can walk in silence with someone you met just a few days prior and know yourself more fully just because of their presence, and to know that they somehow are also known more fully to themselves. It's incredibly powerful, and I get to participate in people's knowing for my work, but the people that I do that with are very unwell. And these people that I was with for that week were really well. And it is just such a gift, a powerful gift, to have your good, kind self that you sometimes doubt reflected back to you from these amazing, creative people. It was a really powerful week.
We had been trying this crazy new life of being back to the Landers for 6 years. We had left our comfortable, cozy, urban professional lives in Minneapolis and moved to an abandoned tobacco farm in rural North Carolina and started a goat cheese dairy farm. Well, it was romantic, and people, they thought, oh, how cool. Gee, I wish I could do that. But they didn't know. They didn't know how hard it was. They didn't know how many goats we killed. They didn't know how bad the cheese tasted for a long time. And I was about 6 years in, and well, we had some great days then by that time, but I still didn't know. Was it really what I was supposed to do to make that huge life change? Were we really making any kind of a difference or having any kind of impact? Had we made the right choice? So there I stood at the farmer's market early one Saturday morning, ruminating, like ruminants do, about nutrition and whether this was really going to nourish me in the long run. And I was thinking, as I waited for the customers to come to my cheese table at the farmer's market, about all the different types of people that came, and how most people luckily really liked this cheese that I made with my hands. I made this cheese. It had been a surprising thing when I shifted from being a director of a counseling center and working with individuals and couples and families and all, trying to really change people, and really have this impact, and being a therapist. But you never really knew if you really changed that many people, right? I did learn over that 20-year career that most people don't really change very much. So you never really did know. And that was a big surprise to me when I learned the satisfaction that came when I just made cheese and I put it out to you and I said, here you go. And you either liked it or you didn't. And I had a word, people that liked it were gushers, because if they liked it, they really, oh my God, this is so good. And so most people were gushers. And I was surprised at what simple pleasure there was in that honest exchange. A few people didn't like it, and they were called yuckers, but that's another story. So there I sat, waiting for the day to begin, wondering how many gushers, how many yuckers I'd have on that day. And I looked down the way, and here came Michelle and her son, Little Tom. Now, Michelle had come to my farmer's market table from the very first day I was at the market. And Michelle was British. She had an American husband. She lived here now, but she was raised and educated in England. And she came and tasted my cheese, and she loved my cheese. Now, if a European person likes your cheese, you've got good cheese, because they really know good cheese, right? So Michelle was a big fan of me, and I was a big fan of her, and she had come every single week. She even started coming when she was pregnant with little Tom, and the only 2 weeks she ever missed were the weeks she was off to have that baby, and then she came with little Tom, and he was eating my cheese his whole 6 years. Well, they were working their way down the market from vendor to vendor, and she stopped to talk to the farmer before me, but little Tom came on over on his own, and it was early in the morning. There weren't very many people there. Little Tom, he was a little bit shy, but he went through his usual ritual of tasting through each of the cheeses to figure out which cheese this week he would ask his mommy to buy him. And you know, he looked around and he realized that it was just little Tom and me standing there. And he looked up at me with his big blue eyes, and he said, "Thank you, Farmer Steve, for making me such wonderful cheese." 10 little words changed my life forever. Because at that moment, I realized little Tom had grown up in a world where he had been to the farm. He knew the goats. He'd seen how we made the cheese. He saw where I lived. He grew up in a world where he thought everybody knew their farmer. He thought it wasn't unusual at all to have a cheesemaker who made cheese for you. And I realized at that moment that we had created that world. We had created that world for that one little boy. And that had made all the difference, and that made it all worthwhile.
When my children were young, I was in my most Earth Mother phase. I wasn't what you'd call a flower child, but my husband and I raised a big garden every year, and I canned and froze most of the vegetables that we ate through the winter. And I did things a little differently than most people. And my mother wasn't as supportive as she might have been at my choices. For example, when I told her that I was going to nurse my babies, she said helpfully, "Well, you might not be able to." And so, you know, I was going against the flow a lot of the time. But I had this wonderful family doctor who understood and accepted that I did things a little differently and was willing to work with me. So when I took my daughter Sarah for her 2-year-old checkup, we went and she got her shots and they drew her blood. And after a few minutes, the doctor literally came running back into the room and he said, "That is the best blood I've ever seen on a 2-year-old. What are you doing?" And in those 2 sentences, I felt validation for all the choices I had made about raising my children.
Back in 2014, the Botanical Society of America, the society that I've belonged to since, oh my goodness, since 1981, started a program they called I Am a Botanist. They had this nationwide, really this worldwide effort to get people to announce to the world, either on YouTube or on some kind of a picture, a photograph with the words "I am a botanist" on it, and they posted them on social media. You had whole classes out there holding huge signs saying "I am a botanist." You had individual YouTube videos being made this way. It was a big thing. They're starting to revive it now, in fact, with this coronavirus, because they want something for people to do to show their solidarity. Now, what this has to do with me has only occurred to me some years after 2014, because the Botanical Society of America started this in about the summer of 2014. Now, back in April of 2014, I won the Board of Governors Award for Excellence in Teaching. And when they do this at UNCG, they make a little video of you, 2 minutes long in my case, that highlights your accomplishments in teaching. And in my case also, they talked a little bit about my research. And I ended this video with the words, "I'm Bruce Kirchhoff, and I'm a botanist." And also that year, I was awarded the Teaching Award from the Botanical Society of America. And when I got that award, I sent the Botanical Society this little video that had me at the very end saying, "I am a botanist." And they put it up on their website for a little bit. And a couple months later, I didn't realize this till 4 years later, but a couple months later, they started a big hoopla about I am a botanist. Now, they have never once acknowledged that my video had anything to do with I am a botanist. But I watched that little video again tonight before I decided to give this talk, and it's pretty definite at the end. It was a really well done video. A student in the media department made it. And instead of having me look at the camera and say I'm a botanist, he had me turning my head and laughing. And in the background, there was my voice, which was clearly not coming out of my mouth at that time because I was laughing, saying I am a botanist. It was so well done. Was there a connection?
When I was 11 years old, my mother, the alcoholic who lost 4 children, decided to take me and my brother from foster care to St. Louis, Missouri, with her 3rd husband. And I was quite pleased to go, hoping that we would maybe have a real family. Got up there, and the guy was really nice to us, and everything went pretty well. Then one evening, I'm guessing they were drinking. We were in bed, and next thing I know, I heard the man hit my mother, and she went flying across the room. I was really tired of that sort of thing. Everybody's saying that it couldn't be, that anybody could do anything about it. So I grabbed a Louisville Slugger, which was a large baseball bat, and told my brother to get some twine, which he had, and I went into the kitchen at 11 years of age, and I told that man if he hit my mother again, I would knock his head through the window and he would not survive. My adrenaline was through the roof. That 6-foot-tall riverboat captain backed out of that door and went away. Now, the next thing, we went to the bedroom and locked the door, terrified that he would come back because he did have a key. My mother was badly hurt. The next day, my mother said to go look for him. So I went looking for him because I was a people pleaser. And I found him in a bar, and I told her where he was, and she went down and came back blasted out of her mind with a broken jaw. And she went into the bed and gurgled, and I was terrified that she could not talk and she was bleeding. So I called the hospital several times, and they sent the police several times. And every time they said, "Do you want to go to the hospital?" her mouth didn't work, and so she couldn't be understood, so they did not take her. So I decided when the dawn came up that I would go find that man and I would make something happen. And I went and found that man, and I told him that he needed to take my mother he needed to give me money to get on a train and take my brother home, that he also needed to call social services and let them know that we would be coming home. And he would need to be taking my mother to the hospital before all those things were done. And I did not mean maybe. And so we put her into the car, and we took her to the hospital, and we got the train tickets, and I went home with my little brother, 10 years of age. And that was the first time that I felt a great deal of power, because I saw a problem I'd heard a lot about, and I solved it. I went on for the rest of my life to remember that power, and I became quite the powerful woman who did a lot of things first of all.
let me reflect back that the stories that I've gathered, I just finished the chapter 8 is on the power to correct injustice. And for women, that's huge. And so when I look into, because I taught leadership for many years, and they have their own ideas about power. And correcting injustice doesn't get a whole lot of airplay. But for women, it is one of the most critical aspects of why we want power, what it's for, and when we step up to the plate. I mean, you got tall, girl.
Stepped up to the plate with the bat.
The bat.
Well, it gave me a lot of power, and I never forgot it. And so I became, and some of y'all know this, I became the first woman power plant electrician in North Carolina, the first lady meter technician in North Carolina, the first energy manager that was female at NC State, at the National Guard, and at the federal government.
So when she gave us this assignment, I just knew you were going to tell a story about the power plant. But you didn't. You told a better story.
There's a lot in the decision, and there's the reasoning behind the power. When women tell stories about power, the reasoning behind is very much to protect well-being. And there's a surge of power. You weren't just protecting yourself, you were protecting your brother and your mom. And the kind of power that's, how to own market share, that's where we end up with, when I ask people to tell me stories about power, certainly the women have very clear ideas about what bad power and what good power is. Mm-hmm. And so the theories about power have traditionally said that power is amoral. It is, it's a utility. It can be used for good or bad, but it is neither good nor bad. Mm-hmm. And that is not what bears out in the stories that women tell about power. Female narratives about power are very clear that the power to coerce or to control is bad power. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that I'm exploring in the book. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for playing, for sharing your stories. And if you want to talk more about it, let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Annette. It's great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Good to see you.
Night, everybody.
Night.
Good to see you.
Night.